Okay, we're moving on from reproductive analysis to nutrition. What I'm going to be presenting to you today is basically some on-farm observation, what I call some case studies of some issues that we've encountered. So hopefully that will be of value today. I like to think of it as observation skills when it really comes down to it. The way that I taught my kids to drive, I really wasn't worried about the mechanics so much. We taught them that, they figured that out. It was their observation skills. Did they see what was going on around them? That's what was important. One caveat I do want to throw in is that I have not looked at the Dairy Challenge data so far. So I'm not trying to steer you one way or the other with what I'm showing you here. Just some teachable moments, hopefully. So as we move on, call this case study 1. This will be the longest one. Go to dairy, call it dairy M. They indicate they have a high incidence of DAs. Fortunately, sometimes when you go to a place, they'll tell you what the issue is or what they think the issue is. Dairy Challenge, you got to figure it out. So in this case, they're saying DAs. September was 4.2, 3.6, then it increased to 6.6. So each month was above the achievable rate. Then they finally got over what we would call an alarm rate. And that's when we say, okay, there potentially is an issue here. And this is normally, if we were live, I'd say, what are some possible causes? But since it's just recorded, these are the kind of the top 4 that I look at: low forage and dry matter intake, mycotoxins, subclinical ketosis, and hypocalcemia. So we're going to investigate all 4 of those. And I will also tell you, these, in my mind, are not in order of importance when somebody tells you they have DAs. So first, let's look at low forage and or low dry matter intake, some observation skills you need to establish. Number 1, this would be a transition cow ration. I know the glare is not the greatest, but it's really shows a good picture. Both of these are 12 kilogram dry matter packages. The one on the left has 1.6 kilograms of straw. Let me get my highlighter here for you. So you can see these larger pieces in here. So these are probably going to be sorted out. You go to this side here, it's a lot better mix, but it's got twice the level of straw in the mix. So more than likely, even though this has less straw, they're still going to eat less of it because it's going to be sorted because it's not cut very well. So that's one thing you need to observe. And as you're looking at whole herd analysis, you go up and down the bunks. This was a herd in Colorado. Do the cows have feed when they come from the milking parlor? We say it all the time. You think we would know it. It's kind of like clean water. You think everybody'd have clean water. They don't. And I know these cows just came from the parlor. I watched them come from there, and they're sitting here waiting. They know their friends got feed. Why don't we? So very important. Cow comfort. You got to make sure all the cows have plenty of space and comfort. Cows have 25% greater blood flow to the mammary gland when they're lying down relative to standing. That's why we want to give them plenty of space, plenty of comfort. I think this is a great illustration. You look around here at this straw that they put in this open lot. Where are the cows lying down? They're all where it's a little bit more comfortable. It's drier, it's cleaner, it's just more comfortable. But not just open lots. We get to the freestall barns. Take a look at the cows. This cow standing up. Is she one of a bunch that are standing or one of a few? If you look around, yeah, there's more cows standing up. So why is that? Does this neck rail need to be adjusted? Was this a jersey, that built for jerseys, and somebody came in and brought in Holsteins? You've got to measure that. You've got to look at it and determine if it's an issue or not. Could be just one cow standing up and it's not an issue. Conversely, bring your jerseys into big free stalls and they're going to be turning around making a huge mess. And then, very important, since we're looking at particularly the transition cows here, look at the transition cow pen. This one is ideal. It's clean. They've got water, accessible to water here, good ventilation, it looks like, plenty of space. Then you can see some places that might look like this. I mean, I could not walk through here, much less another cow. And look how many of them are standing up, because there's not enough room to lie down. So there's a huge impact of stocking density on stress and then milk production. One number I like to use is that for each 10% increase in stocking rate above 80%, we lose about 3/4 of a kilogram per day in milk production in first calf heifers. Guess is for multiparous cows, it's probably that much or more. So another thing to look at, mycotoxins. You know, look at all your wet products and hope they're not spoiled. This was actually a wet haylage, had significant aflatoxin. It was just not the mold that was in it. These mycotoxins can upset rumen fermentation and then cause fertility issues. Then you've got your repro person as well as your nutritionist trying to figure out what's going on. Any of these wet products, wet brew, wet distillers, wet gluten, question asked is how long does that load last, that shipment that they brought in? Is it a few days? Great. Is it 3 weeks and it's the middle of summer somewhere? More than likely, with that wet ingredient, it's going to spoil some. Then also we need to look at proper silage fermentation. A couple of slides here. One, first, is it packed well? Here we know it's packed well. Look how hard this tractor's having to dig in to get the silage out of it. And then, you know, look at the spoilage. How much spoilage is there? Most of the times we'll see a little bit. Just make sure it's not excessive. And then what are they doing with that? They pitch into the side, they feed into the high cows. And then look for some flat surfaces. That gives you an idea of the feed management style. And I'd be remiss if I did not tell you two things: safety. We really don't need to be going around these pits, and fortunately, virtually you will not be doing so, but always think safety around these silage pits. Okay, the last two, subclinical ketosis, hypocalcemia. How do those relate to DAs? Look at this chart developed by Duffield many years ago. We have displaced abomasums. They're correlated with subclinical ketosis and ketosis, as is milk fever. All of these metabolic events are somehow interrelated. So when you hear of one, you've got to kind of think about the others and how they might be correlated. So we look at the data. Let's look at ketosis, subclinical ketosis first. You look at the numbers, very low, boom, probably not an issue. In this case, it was not an issue. But what I would say is when I see numbers this low, I'm kind of questioning how are they actually monitoring either subclinical or ketosis. I would question is they're not doing a very good job of it, because you're going to see a little bit, especially on subclinical ketosis. Then we look at RPs, retained placentas, and milk fevers. So RPs increase over the same time frame that the DAs did, as did the milk fever. So what's our commonality here? Calcium. So here on my bottom line, there's a calcium correlation when it comes to DAs, RPs, and milk fevers. Of course, calcium's involved in milk fevers, calcium mobilization. Think of DAs and RPs and muscle contractions in the rumen, DAs, muscle contractions at the uterus, RPs. So actually the first thing I think about when someone tells me, hey, DAs, we may have a problem, I go to calcium. First thing I want to look at, are you having RPs? Are you having milk fevers? Is that an issue? So that probably tells you these numbers are going up, that's where this is coming from. In this case, a few things, once we got on to calcium, that we wanted to look at was, okay, they're using an anionic salt. And they use a local anionic salt. Local is a key word in this sentence. Normally, y'all would not worry about it, but because this was in an international country, where that country makes a lot of Me Too products that are not very reputable, you've got to be very careful. And they got a great buy on it. It was really cheap. And because of that, it was helping cause some problems. So you got to make sure they're using a reputable product, and there were plenty out there they could have used for a few pennies more. Also found out that one of the ingredients that they were using, it was actually a wet ingredient. The inventory varied greatly. So sometimes it was in the ration, sometimes it was being pulled out, sometimes it was somewhere in between. So they had no consistency in that product going into the total ration. To support the anionic salt theory, we looked at urine pHs, and they were fluctuating hugely, low 7s to high 5s, just way too much. So we knew that was probably, again, going back to the anionic salts. Then unfortunately, when they analyzed forages or rations, they didn't want to spend the money, and they didn't analyze for the minerals. You know, as long as they do it once in a while would be good. So we suggested they analyze for calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and potassium, and then balance accordingly. And really the big one is potassium in those forages, especially for the dry cows, because that's going to have the impact everywhere else. Okay, so that's case study 1, where we kind of looked at metabolics and looked over several things that could cause an issue. And now we'll move to case study 2. These other ones will be a little quicker. I'm calling this one Dairy T, and it's really wasn't a concern to them when they were thinking about it, was low days in milk, because their cows were milking really well. They had 2,200 cows at 117 days in milk. If you remember from Cass's records talk here last week, typical, that standardized 150-day milk, that 150, typically we want to see that 150 to 180. We'll see it at 200. We'll see it a little bit over at times, but this is where we'd like to see. This 117 days in milk, well, that means they're either seasonal breeding, which this herd was not, or they actually kept a majority of the herd in the last 2 to 3 months. Which, what does that mean? That means that about 5 to 6 months ago, this herd was very long in milk, meaning they were all far in milk and days in milk, and production was probably low. So really what we're trying to figure out is, why did that occur? Or we're going to just keep getting a vicious cycle. So I'm going to blame this on Melanie and just say, hey, it's reproductive issues. It very well could be. You know, are the cows getting bred? Did they get it? Somebody new that was doing the artificial insemination? Did they have an issue? And not just are they getting the cows bred, but were they getting them bred appropriately? Because if this is not happening, this will cause them to go long in days in milk and then become fat. And that's going to lead to our transition issues, like we just discussed at the other dairy. So you're walking around the dairy and you look in a pen and you see this cow right here and you think, hey, they're in heat. Things are going well. Well, no, they're not, because the next question is, which pen is this? This was the fresh cow pen. Why is she showing heat? So that tells you a little bit about the management. The cow, there were some cows in wrong spots. So that's all got to be taken care of as well. Okay, but not just repro is going to affect this. It's going to be nutrition as well. Took a look at the rations. The high group is balanced for 84 pounds. Okay. The medium group, what they went to was balanced for 46 pounds, a 38 pounds per day difference. In general, that difference right here, that between those two, should not be more than 20 pounds. And that would be my absolute max. I'd rather see it closer than that, but holy cow, this was huge. So we need to do that, because a big drop in this target milk, dropping them from here, those cows still have that same intake, but they're not going to, because they've got a lot lower energy coming into them, they're just not going to produce the milk, and they're going to predispose themselves to gaining fat. So nutrition can have a huge play here too. Heavy calving. So as we said, they've probably calved a lot of animals in the last 2 to 3 months. Was this planned, seasonal, or is it unplanned? In this case, it was unplanned, but in either way, this can put a lot of stress on the maternity area, especially the people. So if they're used to having, let's say, 20 cows calve a day, and that goes up to 40, and it's still one person doing the job, is it going to get done properly? Then you add on additional issues. Number one, you've got overcrowding. Showed this picture earlier, show it again here, just packed in here, the additional stress on the cows. And that's going to come into milk production, or a decrease in milk production later. Also, if we're bringing those fat cows in, like we showed, that's going to lead to subclinical ketosis, and more of these metabolic events. So we've got to make sure the manpower is okay. So in this case, check breeding protocols, adjust rations, and adjust for people power. Okay, let's go to one more main one. Case study 3, another dairy C, different dairy, but same initial milk fat decrease. If we look here from January 2018 to 2019, they decreased 0.3 points in milk fat, but they maintained milk. This was 2,500 cows. Why did they drop in milk fat? That's what we got to figure out. But what would it mean to the dairy to get that back? It all comes down to the finances, guys. Y'all know that. Take milk fat. If they were getting paid on milk fat, $2.53 a pound at the time, what does that mean if we get this back up? Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys. So we took a look at the rations, etc., made some changes. We were actually able to raise the forage, which we know forage is heavily correlated to milk fat, get quite a bit more forage in there because they were extremely low, but at the same time, getting them more energy. So maybe we could get more milk fat and more milk. We lowered the PUFA numbers. That has a huge effect on milk fat. And then also got a little bit more sugar in what I would consider a respectable area, because sugar, or in this case, molasses, less sorting, we'll get an increase in intakes many times, and it helps with milk fat. So what does this mean to the dairy? 2,500 cows. If we raise that milk fat by just 0.1 percentage point, 367 to 377, that's $16,000 a month. But what does that mean from we got to take into account the ration cost change. Here, if we look here, 593 to 601, it was 8 cents. That was $6,000 a month. Our return on investment is still $10,000 a month. So for a year, let's call it 100,000, and that was for 0.1. What about if we got those other 2 points back too? We're talking $300,000. It's worth some effort for sure. One thing that I would share with you is, lately it's been a very economical to shoot for milk protein. Milk protein's been at all-time high. Last month we hit our very highest point that the price for milk protein has been. Starting to come down a little bit, but it's been very advantageous to feed for it. The question I'm going to ask you is, how does the farm you're working with get paid? Are they paid on protein? Okay, we've got about another minute here or so. I got 2 more slides to finish up with. Let's say you go to a dairy and they say the herd herd average has decreased, milk tank. Well, one thing you could evaluate through the records is the makeup of the herd. This dairy I looked at, for instance, first lactation of fresh cows, they increased from 34% to 44%. I knew they were trying to grow the herd, so that it was almost obvious, but still sometimes the dairyman forgets about it. You've got to remind them. If you look at 8-week milk, what does that difference mean to them? Let's say the milk production average was 64 pounds for the LAC1 and the other cows was 94. That's a 30-pound difference. Pretty substantial. Well, if they have a 10% change in these heifers, there's going to be about a 3-pound change in milk production. And at 4,800 cows, 16 cents a pound, that's $138,000. So these are all the things that we have to consider. One last thing I'd tell you to consider when you're evaluating the herd is cow cooling. Everybody looks at it, but just know it's part of cow comfort. And, again, always think about where you're at. How are they set up for cow cooling? Is it worth some investments for some additional milk? So with that, I would end. And I will see if I can stop recording.